Marky Billson. Caleb Calhoun is on the line with me. He writes for All-C, which I think around this time of year is probably the best Tennessee website, and I'll tell you why. He does a lot of stuff in the off season of football, and certainly, of basketball too, but a lot of really interesting to read historical pieces, ranking lists. I think last year, if memory serves, you ranked all the quarterbacks that Tennessee has ever had since they adopted the T formation in the 60s or so. So, just, really great thought-provoking pieces from Caleb Calhoun. But now the thought that is provoked, how big was Tennessee's men's basketball victory against Kentucky last night?
I think it was huge. And I would just start by saying, it's huge for a couple of reasons. The first would be that Tennessee basketball this year, I had been saying for a little while that people were overestimating how good they thought the Vols were. I'm not saying they were as bad as their 13th ranked position in the SEC preseason rankings before the start of the year, but I didn't think they were a top 25 team. I thought they were a bubble team that would just make the NCAA tournament. A sweep of Kentucky is they're a sure lock now to get to the NCAA tournament, and now they're playing for a 3 or maybe even 2 seed. I still think they're going to end up with a 4 seed probably, but just to be in the running for that is remarkable. And after Alabama this weekend, if they can somehow get past Alabama, then they have a relatively easy schedule the rest of the way out. They got a couple of tough games, but it's not terrible. The other reason it's huge is I hope it dispels this myth that I've been trying to say is a myth for a while, which is there's been this theory that Tennessee basketball can't close games, and people were looking at the North Carolina game and the Arkansas and Auburn games, and I'm thinking, yes, those were games that they blew late, but they also beat Purdue in overtime. And they also beat Kentucky another time in the past. So this idea that they're not able to finish games was kind of a bit of a mess to me. And so I think last night, being able to hit a 3 with under a minute to go to take the lead and then force 2 turnovers down the stretch was pretty impressive. So I think that ends that mess.
Well, now, I want to ask you this question. This football season, Kentucky beat Tennessee. I now see where Tennessee has swept Kentucky in men's basketball. Caleb Calhoun of allfortennessee.com, when you got up this morning and went outside, did you happen to see Spock with a beard walking around?
No, I did not. Hey, Harry, there's a crazier part to that. Not only did Tennessee sweep Kentucky in basketball and lose to Kentucky in football, Tennessee swept Vanderbilt in basketball and lost.
Oh, you know what?
I don't think those things have happened together in the history of the program.
Now that you mention it, yeah. And I've never really thought of Vanderbilt as being a great basketball program. I know they're more competitive historically on the hardwood than certainly the gridiron, but I've never really thought of them as, a team, even maybe when they had Will Purdue or so, that was impressive. I know they made the tournament a few times, but you never really, oh yeah, Vanderbilt, they could win the SEC in basketball. Baseball, women's tennis, that's one thing. Tennessee, of course, you kind of always thought, maybe with the exception of men's basketball from year to year, but historically, hey, they could take the whole thing in any number of sports and such. But Vandy never, respectable basketball, not great basketball, I've always thought. But yeah, now that you mention that, certainly. And of course, what was it? I guess 3 times over a course of 50 odd years. That's all that Vandy beat Tennessee until the last 6 years. So yeah, that's a good point there. And that's why we love Caleb Calhoun, because he's got that historical perspective. If not, and like I said, if you do see Spock with a beard, well, remember that little device in Captain Kirk's room with the buttons. So that might keep you alive. Anyway, let's talk a little bit about football right now. The recruiting rankings, 3 guys were signed today officially, I see on the Vols website. None of them really have tremendous pedigrees. I've seen Rivals rank this class as 24th. I've spent a lot of time telling my listeners, Caleb Calhoun, look, take these rankings with a grain of salt. These are the people that told you Jimmy Clausen was better than Cam Newton, okay? You don't know until 4 years down the line, but just what are your takes? Who are you impressed with in this Tennessee recruiting class?
Well, I was always kind of focused on the quarterback situation for a while. I always thought J.T. Shrout was the biggest steal because, again, he was a 3-star, but he was a late bloomer. Jeremy Pruitt was finding late bloomers a lot of the time, and then he found another one today who signed in John Mincy. But outside of that, I do have to point out it's kind of been a horrible morning for the Vols overall. Quay Walker, they thought they were going to flip him from Alabama up until last weekend when he visited Georgia, and then he visited Georgia, and then he flipped to Georgia this week. And obviously, given the situation, nobody can blame him for wanting to sign with Georgia. They've got the most ridiculously great recruiting class I've ever seen. It actually is better than any of Nick Saban's classes.
Yeah, now it has 7 5-star guys. Of course, what is a 5-star guy? I mean, I know Cade Mays was supposed to be one before he, got out of his commit with Tennessee when Butch Jones was fired and went down to Georgia instead. But I mean, you don't know what Cade Mays is going to do in all honesty. I mean, you hope he doesn't get hurt or anything like that or flunk out, but you don't know if that's going to happen. And you don't know if maybe he won't be like somebody like, let's say, Chris Walsh, and that's a historical perspective, but Walsh was he was Steve Walsh's brother. He was supposed to be the next great Miami quarterback, keeping that link of Kelly to Kosar to Testaverde to Walsh. He was supposed to replace his brother, wound up, I think, with a hitch in his throwing motion. I don't know if he ever played a down for Miami. He was the number 1 recruit in the country one year in the early 90s. So again, you just don't know. And I really emphasize that in this. And it goes to my second question. Do you think, though, that the recruiting rankings have actually been damning to Tennessee? I mean, let's just face facts. Rivals ranked them the 5th best recruiting class in 2014. It wasn't the 5th best recruiting class of 2014. We know that in hindsight. But how damning, though, was it to the last coaching staff to have these high recruiting rankings?
Well, there's a couple of layers to this story. It's Tennessee specifically, and then programs in general. What I would say to you is that you're right about, we don't know how these players are going to work out. But I will say this. Just because you have a top 5 class doesn't mean it's going to be good. Mm-hmm. But it is impossible, and I want to say this right now, it is impossible to win a national championship without a couple of top 5 classes. They're a baseline to win a national championship, but that doesn't mean that they will win you a national championship.
I mean, I realized they weren't the national champions, but let me just put this out. Central Florida in 2014 had the 73rd recruiting ranking. And those are this past season's redshirt juniors and seniors. And so my way of thinking is, and this is one of the criticisms, and by the way, full disclosure, I used to write for Rivals and Scout. I didn't, do the recruiting rankings. I wrote features and stuff, but I used to write for them. And I just gotta, say that part of the reasons why we think Georgia has 7 5-star players is they're Georgia. They're the frisky young colt. That's where the state that produced 29 players in the NFL draft last year, most in all of the country. And so, yet, naturally, it's going to look like, oh, yeah, played for a national championship. They got Cade Mays. Maybe they do have the number 1 class. We won't know for 4 years, though. And I'm likely some of those 5-star guys are going to transfer away, just like, say, Jalen Hurd did. That's my take. And
right. But what I would counter with is, you're right about that. We don't know it's going to be great. But what I would say is, you're right about Central Florida. This past year, they go undefeated 1 year, but it's no coincidence that Alabama had the number 1 class every year in the last 10 years almost, and they've had the biggest dynasty in recent history.
I'll buy that, but I just wonder how many times that it's after the fact, Caleb Calhoun of All for Tennessee. In other words, oh, he must be good. Alabama wants him. you're not going to get that to, a Julian Lane. And I know you're to say, who is that guy? He just signed with ETSU, okay? And so, yeah, your natural progression there is like, why should I care about a guy who signed with ETSU? The only thing I can tell you is that I was broadcasting high school football. I saw him play, scored 20 touchdowns for a bad football program. And, I actually think he could play right away for ETSU. And this is a program that, has produced Donnie Abraham and all that. Obviously, Donnie Abraham, who had 30 interceptions in the NFL, wasn't recruited by FBS. Again, we just don't know. I mean, it's late bloomer.
Are you saying that you think some of these star ratings are added on when they see the schools that are pursuing the players?
I talked about a player named Junior Brown. Now, do you remember, I talked about him last week. Do you remember 2015, there was a high school football game in Pennsylvania, wound up with a 107-90 score. Do you remember that game by any chance?
I don't remember that.
Okay. No. Meadville beat Du Bois. Okay, but anyway, the player on the team that scored 107 points, his name is Junior Brown. He'll probably start for Penn State very shortly. He rushed for 722 yards in that game. He was rated the fastest man in Pennsylvania that year, in all of every high school athlete. He didn't get any stars until Penn State offered him, and Penn State was a late offer. Before that, he was going to go to Temple. Now think about that.
Okay, and did they boost his star rating though after
he was not given any stars until Penn State came in.
Okay, so you're suggesting that's what I was getting at. So you're suggesting that some of these players' star rankings aren't based on what people see from them on the field, but based on the caliber of the schools that are offering them.
I think in the case of Junior Brown, who, like I said, was going to go to Temple and had 3 offers, one from an FBS school, and was outstanding, track player, obviously was getting it done, rushed for 722 yards in a game, for crying out loud. And it wasn't until Penn State came a-calling late that he got any stars whatsoever. Think about that.
Okay. Yeah, that happened actually just recently with a Tennessee commit right now that for this year, and Jordan Young, who actually I think is going to sign elsewhere, but he's committed, but he hasn't signed yet. But Tennessee offered him early before anybody kind of doubted him. Then he committed to Tennessee, and then people realized how good he was, and literally within like a week, he got boosted up to a 3-star on Rivals and a 4-star on 247.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that a lot of it is, oh, wow, Tennessee is interested, and I think a lot of it also is with Tennessee's fan base, the recruiting sites, they know that, if we say Tennessee's having a nice class, is that much more of a chance that the Tennessee fans are going to spend the $10 a month and read about the current incoming crop of great players at Tennessee. If they're ranked number 35, like Phil Fulmer's last class it was, less so. And I think there's something to be said for that. Obviously, they have to have some credibility, but I think that when you have Central Florida as 73rd, Central Florida's never going to be number 1, even though they're in Florida.
Right, I get what you're saying. What I would say to you with Tennessee specifically, where Tennessee's a little different from like a school like Alabama and Georgia, and this is what me and you have talked about in the past, was kind of the lay of the recruiting land for Tennessee. When they get top 10 classes, if you notice, it's usually because they were less selective about who they went for, because, they were so desperate for the top recruiting classes, because they don't have as much of a base in state. So they might take a risk on a couple of character guys and things like that, that Alabama and Georgia have the luxury of not having to do. And Texas too, and I mean, not just 2014 is not a top 5 class. 2009 and 2010 were both top 10 classes. Those were overwhelmingly Kiffin recruits, and half those guys were kicked out of the program within a year.
Yeah, I mean, look at what happened with Bryce Brown, number 1 recruit. Whatever happened to him? He became a marginal pro with the Bills. So I mean, compare that to. And I went through the list of number 1 guys, and I mean, the 3 that really stood out for me were Vince Young, Adrian Peterson, and Jadeveon Clowney. Those really went out for me. But I mean, even you could come out and say, well, how good was Vince Young really? I mean, what did he do for the Titans? He set them back 10 years. I mean, if you want to play that game, there was I think it was Ernie Sams, a linebacker, cup of coffee in the NFL. He was ranked over Reggie Bush, who wins the Heisman. I mean, explain this to me again. You just don't know. And I do understand, let's look at this guy's resume. Wow, a field goal kicker came in. He kicked 30 out of 31 field goals. Okay, yeah, I understand why you'd be optimistic about that. But don't give me, Bryce Brown number 1 yet. We won't know for 4 years if he was number 1.
Right. What they do with these is it's kind of like, I always joke this was on a much smaller scale when I was trying to get a job coming out in the broadcast industry within the resume tape. That's what broadcasting companies do with that. They really are just looking at your potential and what you can be, but they can't measure your work ethic. There's just 1,000 things that are impossible to measure.
Sure.
And honestly, I mean, it goes even from the NFL to college, from college to the NFL. NFL draft always misses on guys, and they have a way better barometer. I think one of the mistakes in NFL, and I've always insisted this, I think college production matters more than potential when it comes to the NFL draft.
I agree.
The NFL draft always emphasizes potential for some reason.
I agree totally with you. Look at the quarterbacks that are... I remember I know I'm talking now 1990 and I should try more contemporarily, but, I can recall Dan McGuire. That was Mark McGuire's brother. He was 6'8", and he looked like a real pro, but wait a minute, that was a total combine guy. And meanwhile, why would you pick that guy? And he was drafted 15th overall. He was actually drafted ahead of Emmitt Smith. Think about that. Yeah, he was drafted 2 spots by the Seattle Seahawks ahead of Emmitt Smith. Think about that. I mean, and again, the combine guys, and that's also where I go. I mean, I've known these recruiting people. I worked for one who famously said to the Washington Post, I can tell if a player is going to make it in 15 seconds or not. Really?
Yeah, I don't think anybody can tell in 15 seconds.
And, no, I mean, what he's saying, I mean, yeah, obviously, and it's a great quote, but I mean, all I can think of is he's got the stopwatch out, and he says, this defensive back runs a 4.3 40. He could make it. This one runs a 4.6 40. No, he probably won't make it. I mean, that's all I can think of if you're trying to say you can tell in 15 seconds. Otherwise, you've got the world's greatest ego and on what? Trying to evaluate high school football players? Really? I mean, that's what you have an ego about? Yeah, okay.
It was one of the things when he was recruiting, one of the smart things Derek Dooley said, and sometimes I look back at, I remember at the time feeling like Derek Dooley inherited a mess, and I thought he knew football more than he got credit for, but one of the things he said about recruiting at this level is, when you're recruiting like at Central Florida or Louisiana Tech, you probably have to be more meticulous when you evaluate the talent. But at this level, I mean, the coaches, the players are recruiting, and the evaluations are used. So, I mean, coaches' wives could figure out some of these players are good, that have potential, And it's, I mean, the same method. All you got to do is look at him on the field and be like, oh, he's pretty good. You should go get him. And
I want to ask you about, though, I mean, while we're saying this, and again, with recruiting, I mean, I say, look at the bio, kind of say, oh, I know that guy. I mean, I am kind of impressed with someone who comes from Arizona Western, because Caleb Calhoun, I've spent some time in Yuma, and I know how big that junior college is. I'm kind of impressed with a punter from Airport High, because as a little boy, I used to live in Columbia, South Carolina, and yeah, Airport was a football power in Columbia. Oh, they've got a punter from, Airport High. Wow, that's pretty big. They got him out of the backyard of the Gamecocks. Nice going. But we don't know if this guy's going to shank every punt, for crying out loud, or if he's going to boot 80-yard boomers and they won't go for it, and they'll go for it on 4th down whenever they cross midfield because his leg is so strong he's hurting people in the stands with his kicks. We don't know. I mean, it's just... Anyway, that's my rant of the day. Isaac Taylor Stewart, you like him a lot. Where's he going to go?
Up until last weekend, I was sure he was going to take Alabama or USC. And then his visit was so good. I don't want to get sucked into reading everybody picking that he's going to everybody predicting that he's going to pick Tennessee. I think Tennessee's definitely definitely in the running, but I'm going to go ahead and say he's still. I think it's still down to. I think it's probably USC still or Alabama.
And he's from San Diego, so that makes some sense. And I will say this about Tennessee. What do you think of any initial insights on Jeremy Pruitt's recruiting strategies? It does seem like he's recruiting California a lot, and I don't have a problem with that. Better to recruit California, for instance, than, say, Vermont. I'd rather have you a pipeline out in the Golden State than, the nutmeg state of Connecticut or something. What are your thoughts right now on the Jeremy Pruitt coaching strategies, if you will, recruiting strategies?
Well, given the fact that he's following Butch Jones, who was probably the worst about beefing up a recruiting class and not worrying at all about how they fit the system, I got to give Pruitt some credit. If you remember,
that's a good point.
About this for a little while. When Pruitt took over Tennessee, the class was falling. There was a wave of decommitments. They were falling out of the top 25, but they still had a reasonably top 30 class. And Pruitt, to his credit, kind of told a few elite players committed to the Vols. He said, "Look, you're not really a fit for what we're trying to do here," and kind of let him go. And the class fell outside of the top 60 at that point, and Pruitt, he completely reshuffled the recruiting board. And I have to say, it is at least the one thing you can tell about Pruitt is he does have a specific type of player he's looking for to fit his specific type of system, as opposed to Butch Jones, who wants to run a spread offense, but then somehow plug a power back like Jalen Hurd in there. And so I think that at least this time, at least Tennessee now has a coach who he knows what he wants. He may or may not get the guys for the system, particularly this year when it's so late and Tennessee's coming off a 4-8 year, even if you're Jerry Pruitt, it's hard to sell Tennessee right now. But I think that at least looking forward, you can tell that he's not going to waste roster spots just for highly star-rated recruits just to beef up the class if they're not going to fit a system at all.
We're talking to Caleb Calhoun of allfortennessee.com, which I think is perhaps the best off-season Tennessee website. And I mean that, even though I'm asking you way too long questions here. We're trying to have a conversational interview, Caleb Calhoun. I do want to ask this one thing that kind of, I guess, put my antenna up. Was earlier this week, and it was Phil Fulmer talking a little bit, and he said this, that his relationship with Jeremy Pruitt, he doesn't want to interfere, but he wants to assist. And this came up again, I saw recently on, the various Tennessee media sources and such. What are your thoughts on that?
I think Fulmer is trying to figure out exactly how to say what he wants to say in the way that he can be like Doug Dickey was for him. And he's kind of insisted that over a while, and that, Fulmer always insisted one of the biggest advantages he had to taking over as head coach of Tennessee was that Doug Dickey was pretty much in his corner from the start. And, having a legendary coach who was successful at Tennessee to be backing you and helping you out is a big advantage. And I think that Fulmer wants to try to replicate for Jeremy Pruitt what Doug Dickey did for him. And, it's understanding that it is a different time period in certain ways. Now, I don't think the difference is obviously Tennessee's not as far removed under Pruitt from Philip Fulmer's tenure as they were under Philip Fulmer from Doug Dickey's tenure. So the game hasn't changed as much as it had with Dickey to Fulmer.
And I could see where having Fulmer in your fold could be, if asked, good advice. But do you know any, dare I ask, circumstances in which, let's say, Doug Dickey's 2 cents worth or his advisement really helped Phil Fulmer win a game, play one player over another who became a star, say, you know what, you ought to look at Jason Witten as a tight end, not a defensive lineman? I mean, do you know of some instance where Dickey had that influence for a positive over Fulmer?
I don't know of a specific one, and it's hard for me to think of one where it would happen. I will say that one of the things, and this is kind of interesting, I don't know if they're similar, but Dickey, in his second recruiting class, landed Dewey Warren, and Fulmer landed Peyton Manning in his second recruiting class, and those are the two quarterbacks who usher in a new era of Tennessee football.
That's a good point.
And
that's a great point.
That's kind of interesting, but I don't know if there was, again, it's hard for me to know if Dickey did actually anything specific, but it was
Well, I just wonder what sort of an influence and what kind of a taskmaster that a Fulmer, certainly a coach likes to have, pretty free reign. He's not going to be comfortable if a guy really looks over his shoulder, even if he's a football coach that's won a national championship. I mean, it's Pruitt's job now. On the other hand, yeah, I do understand, you know what, that ought to be a real, that ought to be a nice resource to have. I do remember the one time, though, and I mean, forgive the old Steelers fan, when Bill Cowher took over the Steelers from Chuck Noll, and he actually went out and asked, wanted to have a conversation about coaching, and Noll would only ask questions about each other's families. He was trying to tell him, it's your team now. No, you're the coach now. You're a capable coach. Don't have me looking over your shoulder. And I wonder, what the relationship will be. It is a cause of concern, actually, that I have. Caleb Calhoun, thank you. It has been great talking on signing day, and we will be talking to you more during the off season. Tri-City Sports Now coming back after this. I hope I didn't talk your ear off, and I think that I did.
No, that was